All right. So let's look at metabolism, cellular respiration, these chemical reactions here. So metabolism, guys, is just all of these biochemical pathways that are within a living organism that are basically there to provide us with the energy. We have, when it comes to these chemical reactions, we have those that are reactants and those that are going to be products. When it comes to reactants and products, reactants are the things that are reacting, usually on the left side of the equation, right here, A and B. Those would be my reactants. The product is what is formed in this chemical reaction, generally on the right side of the equation. So in this case right here, C would be the product, okay? When it comes to these things, understanding reactants and products allows you to understand chemical pathways, positive and negative feedback loops. Sometimes the product will cause more reactants to react with one another to get more products. That would be positive feedback. Sometimes the product is a negative feedback mechanism, and it's going to cause those reactants to not form anymore. And that stops the chemical pathway from occurring. Okay. When we look at these chemical reactions, A plus B yields C. When we look at these chemical reactions, we can look at a number of different ways to which we classify these reactions. Do they provide a change in chemical structure? Are we forming something new? Changes in chemical energy. Okay. Are they reversible or inversible? That's where these major things kind of come in. When we talk about chemical reactions from here on out, because we're going to talk about chemical reactions to get a muscle to contract, chemical reactions to get a nerve impulse to go from your brain down to your toes, heart to contract. Think of anything happening within the body there. We're ultimately going to be talking about these chemical reactions. We're just not going to use them by name per se, okay? I'm not going to call it a synthesis reaction, okay? We're going to give it another name, okay? But that's ultimately what these things are that we're going to be talking about. And I apologize if this is rehash from previous stuff, but I got to go over it because I'm not 100% sure some people had all this thing. So if this is stuff that you had before, just sit back and enjoy the easiness of this chapter here. All right. So we got a decomposition reaction. And here is the example of it right there. Obviously, something big is being broken down into smaller bits. When it comes to, think of the digestive system. When you are chewing food, when you eat that chicken sandwich or that piece of chicken, it's something big. Through mechanical and chemical digestion, we break it down in its component parts, okay? Amino acids, proteins, right? So in that case here, here's my decomposition reaction. Here's my example here. Sucrose. Obviously something big that's broken down in its component parts. It's a molecule of glucose and a molecule of fructose. Yes, this is a decomposition reaction. Something big becomes something small. It's also catabolic. Okay. In catabolism, we are breaking things down. Anabolic steroids. When you take anabolic steroids, you get big and buff. Okay, you're building muscle. Okay, catabolic is the exact opposite of that. It's a catastrophe. Everything's breaking apart. All right. So decomposition, catabolic, same general thing. Something big is broken down into its component parts. The exact opposite would be synthesis. Okay. A synthesis reaction is where we take two smaller things and make something bigger. Add fructose and glucose together to get you sucrose. So if we just went backwards in this problem, okay, it would be a synthesis reaction. The example they give you, 2 individual amino acids, string them together, you get a dipeptide, it gets something bigger. Again, this is an anabolic type of reaction. You're building, you're making bigger. So synthesis reaction, anabolic reaction, similar names, similar terms for similar stuff. As you can kind of see there in this picture and in this picture, water is also involved. Okay. So sometimes a synthesis reaction or an anabolic reaction can be referred to as a dehydration synthesis reaction, or even a condensation reaction. Welcome to science, guys. In science, one thing can have a multitude of various different names, and they're trying to fine tune this, and they're trying to streamline it so that every kind of spot within the scientific spectrum talks about in the same regard. But unfortunately, we are just not there at that point. Okay. So if you were in Biology 101 class, the book may have called this a condensation reaction because water leaves the reaction. So water is manifested, or you can say as water is leaving the reaction. There's your dehydration synthesis reaction. I know, right? Science has got to be a pain in the ass. Here, hydrolysis, hydro, water, lysis, to break down, to destroy. Here, water is added to the reaction to get those big things to be broken down into smaller things, okay? So there are a multitude of various different names. That's all I'm trying to impress upon you. Major types of reactions, decomposition or synthesis, can also be referred to as catabolic, anabolic, respectively, or a hydrolysis or a dehydration synthesis reaction. Okay, multitude of names for chemical reactions that are 2 individual little things, breaking down or building up. And we see this a lot, excuse me, we see this a lot within the digestive system within the body. Another one that we will see ad nauseum, but really not make reference to a whole heck of a lot, is this thing called an exchange reaction. An exchange reaction is, you may have seen it as a coupled reaction. Here's where we add ADP and an inorganic phosphate and get ATP. Okay. So we are going to see a number of, no problem. We have seen a number of, we'll see a number of these type of reactions when it comes to muscle contraction, definitely when it comes to, definitely when it comes to nerve impulse conduction, we'll see a number of these exchange type of reactions where something is broken down and gets added right back to it. Going from one thing to another thing in exchange. Again, pretty basic stuff there.
I got a question.
Sure.
What is ATP? It keeps coming up.
Oops. Adenosine triphosphate. I'll write it down here for you.
Is it something I have to know?
Yes. Adenosine triphosphate is what ATP stands for. A, adenosine, ADENOSINE. T, tri, that's a T, not a J. Tri means 3. And phosphate, the P, 3 of them. And it's the bonds that exist between, let me just if I do, there's adenosine, phosphate, and phosphate. It's that little sucker right there. That bond that exists between those phosphate ions. Break that thing and a buttload of energy gets released. Okay. So this idea of recycling, this coupled reaction when it comes to ATP, it's going to be the driving force to help us maintain balance and equilibrium within the body.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's what ATP is. How we make this ATP is cellular respiration, and we'll get to that here in a second. When it comes to this ability to make ATP, we are taking something big, glucose, breaking it down through a number of different steps, getting it down to its most inert parts that give us absolutely nothing. And we just urinate them or exhale them out. Through the steps of cellular respiration, in order to harness all the energy within that glucose molecule, we go through a number of what's called oxidation reduction reactions, redox reactions. Okay. And it is the electrons that are floating in those orbital shells around all of the elements. It is the electrons that are going to have all of this ability to help us create concentration gradients, to help us establish a concentration gradient to make ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Excuse me. We are going to have a number of products that will either gain or lose an electron. If something loses an electron, we call that oxidized. It becomes more positive. Electrons are negative. If it gains an electron, it is called reduced. Electrons again are negative, and so they become more negative. In the confines of a chemical reaction, awesome. Gain and lose an electron, fabulous. No ramifications for that. Okay. In the totality of an individual, this has some wear and tear in the body, because invariably there's going to be stuff that is reduced and wants to be at equilibrium, wants to be at peace. So it's going to look for something to bind to. When you get a number of these reduced entities, these free radicals, they are looking around for something to bind to because they have an open spot, because there should be an electron there, but one was taken from me. Excuse me. Excuse me, guys. This weather is crazy. It's going to be looking to bind to something. So it's going to bind with something within the structure around it. So it's going to cause some wear and tear on structures. And this is what causes cellular breakdown, which we see it as old age, wrinkly skin. Okay. One of the classic examples are NAD and FADH. NAD plus, oxidized. It's looking for a hydrogen ion with those electrons that it carries with it to bind to. And in doing so can help yield us a buttload of energy. Does anybody know where NAD is going to take that hydrogen ion and those electrons with it, where it's taking it to? Glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain. Does anybody know? Takes them to the electron transport chain. Okay. And that's going to be our big yielder of ATP, of energy within a cell. So there it is, NAD, oxidized. it gets reduced into NADH. There's that little hydrogen ion that I was talking about. And with that hydrogen ion carries those little electrons with it. And again, those are going to be fabulous suckers to help us harness a lot of energy. When it comes to breaking things down and releasing energy, we can also give it, there's like 1,000 different names. Yes, I know. That's what makes this thing so confusing sometimes. We have these reactions that require an input of energy, and we have reactions that give off energy. We have exergonic reactions, which you don't have to do anything to. These are chemical reactions that can occur pretty damn quickly, and they release energy. I don't have to do anything with them. So in an exergonic reactions, since there really wasn't any investment of any type of energy needed to break down those structures, there's a huge release of it. An endergonic reaction, an exo means exit. Endo means within, okay, or putting into, okay? So in an endergonic reaction, I have to put, I see you. So in an endergonic reaction, I have to put in energy to get the chemical reaction to go. Question?
Yes. I didn't know if you said it already. I didn't hear it, but I was wondering what the difference between an exergonic and an exothermic are, and then an endergonic and an endothermic reaction are.
Semantics. It's involving heat. Okay. Exothermic just means it gives off heat, and endothermic means it can absorb heat. That's all it is.
So it's heat versus energy, basically.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, and heat is energy.
Yeah. Okay. So it's virtually the same thing then.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. It is virtually the same thing, and we're talking about energy. Now, heat's given off. Obviously, with an exergonic and exothermic reaction, energy is released. And when I release energy from those reactants, like glucose, energy is not going to be, I don't have a yield of 100%. Cellular respiration is only like 33% efficient. So I'm getting 33 units of energy. The rest is lost as heat. Okay. So there's your exothermic part of it as well. Endothermic, you have to have an input of heat. You have to have an input of energy, okay, to get the chemical reaction to occur. And if you've done chemistry, like you all have, or done Gen Bio, okay, sometimes you have to heat up stuff to get it to react. That would be an endothermic and endergonic type of reaction. And here's our coupled reaction right here. I have to supply energy, endergonic. I am combining two things. I am combining adenosine diphosphate, which is adenosine triphosphate minus a phosphate. So in a ATP formation reaction here, I am building up, right? This is an anabolic type of reaction. I'm synthesizing something, combining two things and making one. to get that little phosphate to be added on, okay, I have to have a little bit of input of energy. When I have ATP and I utilize it, all I do is break off that little high energy bond there that you see labeled. And when it uncouples, it becomes ADP again and an inorganic phosphate. This is catabolic, right? I'm taking something big and I'm breaking it down. With this type of reaction, I can release energy. And again, it helps us to fund the synthesis type of reaction over there, ADP plus a phosphate. We'll just talk about it here real quick. In skeletal muscle, you store a little bit of ATP, okay? You store a little bit. Creatine phosphate gives you about, 15 to 30 seconds of ATP. Okay. In some people, it gives only a handful of seconds of ATP. Just depends on the muscle and the health of the individual. But, just a few seconds of ATP, what's the point? Well, the ability to store a little bit of ATP in the form of creatine phosphate in skeletal muscle allows you to do stuff before mechanisms can kick in. Aerobic respiration, right? I'm sitting down on a chair. To get up and walk across the room, may not take a whole heck of a lot. But to go across the room and get into the next room, that may require maybe 40 seconds. Maybe to get up out of my chair at school and walk across campus to my car is obviously going to take maybe 4 minutes, 7 minutes. Those first few seconds of having a supply of ATP as you get up and move around allows the aerobic respiration system to kick in, increase rate and depth of breathing. Okay, so you can get glucose into the mitochondria, okay, or break down glucose and get it into the mitochondria. So you can start making a whole buttload amount of energy. All right. So this concept of ATP and do muscles have it? Do they not have it? That will vary depending on the type of training you do, the type of muscles that you have. You have 3 different types of skeletal muscle within the body. Your genetics kind of predetermine the amount of certain types of skeletal muscle fibers that you have. Some of those have great stores of ATP. Some of them have very pathetic stores of ATP. And it dictates the amount of movement, type of movement that muscles can do. Short duration, explosive, or can go and go and go and go and go. So this concept of having enough ATP is really the crux to help maintain you and doing your everyday things that you are going to be doing. Reversible, irreversible. I mean, it seems fairly obvious. Reversible, as you can kind of see, can go both ways. Okay. Irreversible, I mean, it's just the English language. Okay. Only go in one direction. I'm not going to get into that because we're not going to get in too much to a lot of those individual type of reactions there. We're looking at it as a totality, and a lot of the reactions that we're going to be talking about in class are going to be honestly coupled type of reactions here. How fast do these things occur? Everything has a maximum speed at which that they can occur. We can measure reaction rates. We can obviously affect reaction rate. affect reaction rates. Obviously, the big one would just be temperature, right? You've all cooked food before. Add a little heat, gets the two substances in the pot to come together a little bit quicker, and voila, you can get your food a hell of a lot faster. Same thing here in the body. We have a normal range of temperature that the body likes to function in. Go above that temperature, and now I've sped up chemical reactions too fast, and now I've actually gotten too hot, and now I start to break down structures. I start to denature proteins. Okay, so now chemical reaction won't occur at all if you get it too hot. If the body's too cold, stuff moves really slow and it doesn't interact very well. So chemical reactions go a hell of a lot slower. Right? So when it comes to this concept of reaction rate and how much energy do I have to put in and how fast can these things go, all of this is going to be dictated by a number of different things. Temperature, amount of substances, and then the E word. What's the E word? Anybody think of the E word?
Electrons.
It is an E word. I like it.
Enzyme.
Say that again.
Enzymes.
Enzymes. Yes. Okay. Enzymes, right? Okay. How many enzymes do we have? Do we have enzymes at all? Enzymes are just biological catalysts that bring things together a hell of a lot faster and help to speed up reaction rates. Okay. Again, enzymes is going to be the hallmark for how things are doing, how the digestive system works. Okay. Or in the respiratory system, urinary system, how all of our biological functions happen. Enzymes help speed this up. The endocrine system is at the key role of this.